Hello, this is Vlad, and welcome to the interview of Crypto Insider. Today I'm going to be talking with Giacomo Zucco, who is a well-known Bitcoin maximalist and one of the few people who embrace the label of being a maximalist despite all the bad meanings that it might have. And that's something that we'll be discussing today. So hello, Giacomo.
Hi everybody. We're not so few. I mean, there is a lot of people that is self-labeling maximalist, but yeah.
It seems to be like a derogatory term on Twitter. And some people appropriate the idea and say, I'm also a maximalist, but at the same time, I also believe in Monero or in Litecoin or whatever. And I
Yeah.
remember watching the last episode of Magical Crypto Friends, which is with Charlie Lee and Fluffy Pony and Whale Panda and Samson Mao. And at some point, they all said, we are actually Bitcoin maximalists in the sense that we want Bitcoin to succeed and we want it to be the best coin, but we don't want it to be the only one, or not necessarily. So do you think that there are layers to being a maximalist?
There certainly are, because the term itself was created in a pejorative form and derogatory form from Vitalik Buterin and others in order to represent this approach as basically wrong. So it was some kind of it was a blockchain slur, and some of us adopted that in order to diffuse the rhetorical attempt. And so right now everybody's using the term in different ways. I tried in Riga to give a presentation about a very, very scary, strict definition of maximalism with a lot of bad connotation in order to try to prove that even that very, very scary cult-like definition of maximalism is actually very, very close to what a cautious approach will be to this whole ecosystem. So yeah, there are like Fluffy Pony and Charlie Lee. They are people who are contributing somehow to Bitcoin. So in a way, I would say they are definitely Bitcoiners. I tend to use the term maximalism in order to imply that I really do not think that altcoins can succeed in general. So while I'm not sure that Bitcoin will succeed, I'm kind of sure, I mean, as sure as I am of other things, I'm sure that I don't know, the small private internet that you create in your garage is not going to take over the internet very, very soon. In the same way, I'm kind of sure that altcoins cannot be sustainable and cannot deliver what they promise, while Bitcoin could very well fail itself. So right now, from a descriptive point of view, I am like a fiat money maximalist, meaning that I recognize that right now, US dollar is the money, unfortunately, is the kind of money people is using. It sucks because it's manipulated, inflated, difficult to transmit over the internet without third parties, and the third parties can censor you, they can spy on you, they can track you, they can enforce KYC, AML mafias. So it's a bad situation, but that's the descriptive reality. Bitcoin could maybe overthrow that. I hope that it will, and I think that there are very, very good chances it will. While altcoins, by definition, I think they cannot succeed.
I remember that last week I had an interview with Jimmy Song, and he had that controversial statement that it's a good idea to spend with your credit card and then pay with the Bitcoin that you have. And do you think that it's up to this point, it's a better idea to actually use fiat for your purchases and save your Bitcoin just for emergency spendings?
Yeah, I completely agree. Actually, in the presentation of Riga about maximalism, I included also this part. So I argued that these points, of course, in a satirical kind of sarcastic way, but also seriously in a way with some nuances. I argued first my position about altcoins. Altcoins cannot succeed. Basically, altcoins are scam in a very loose definition of the term for some, in a very strict definition for some others. The second point was that any important change to the base rules of Bitcoin is also something that we should reject, and we should basically not accept. And the third point was about spending. The simplified triggering version of what I said is that pushing people to spend Bitcoin is a scam. The nuanced, detailed version will be that if we think Bitcoin can be a better form of money, during the process of monetization of Bitcoin, in which Bitcoin chooses to just be a digital collectible and start to become a store of value, and then a medium of exchange, and then eventually maybe even a unit of account, so it becomes really money. In this phase, it's reasonable to expect an appreciation of Bitcoin compared to fiat money. And even if Bitcoin doesn't appreciate, which is something it has to do if it's going to succeed, fiat money is by definition always depreciating as far as purchasing power is concerned. So fiat money is always debased, inflated, and depreciated over time. So if you have two kinds of money, both kind of accepted, let's assume first that you have two kinds of money accepted at the same rate in the market around you. And one money is going to be depreciated over time, and the other money is instead sun money. It cannot be arbitrarily inflated. It's very resistant to production. So you have hard money and easy money, and the market around you accept both at the same rate. Which one you should spend first? Of course, the easy money first. That's called Gresham law, but Gresham law is actually referred more specifically to legal tender and denominations, but we could call it maybe Thiers law, which is more proper. Thiers law says that the good money in store of value terms drives off the bad money, while Gresham law, simplified, says that the bad money in everyday purchases drives out the good money, which is instead hoarded and hodled and stored. So I agree with what Jimmy said, may be triggering, because we spent a lot of time in the early Bitcoin narrative about we should always use Bitcoin in the sense of spend Bitcoin, and we should hope for merchant adoption. But actually, that will kind of all fake. Every time we celebrated the merchant adoption of Bitcoin, we were actually celebrating some guy joining BitPay in order to receive Bitcoin from hodlers, from people believing in Bitcoin, and immediately sell Bitcoin at market price on the open market, actually depressing the price. It's not real adoption. While using Bitcoin to store your wealth, that's adoption. That's an actual use of Bitcoin. So I was saying before, assuming that the market is accepting both forms of money, the shitty devaluated money and the hard money, you should spend the first, the former first. But we are not even in that situation. We are in a situation in which the market usually do not even accept the hard money. So we have a strong hard money, which is not even very widely accepted, and fiat money, which is accepted everywhere basically, and it sucks by definition in order in storing wealth. So it's a no-brainer. You should spend first the shitty kind of money, which is depreciated and which everybody already accepts. Of course, there are some caveats here if we want to be super pedantic. If you only receive Bitcoin, if you are one of the lucky dudes that manage to be completely unbanked, post-bank, and you receive your wage in Bitcoin only, and you have 100% of your wealth in Bitcoin only, in that situation, you will spend Bitcoin. Or if you want to spend in one of those use cases that require, by definition, Bitcoin, because fiat money systems will not let you spend money that way. For example, you want to donate to WikiLeaks and you cannot use credit card. You want to buy recreative substances on the Silk Road, which are maybe legal in some country but illegal in some other country. You cannot use credit cards on PayPal or Apple Pay for that. So in that case, you spend Bitcoin because you don't have anything else to spend, or because that specific purchase cannot be performed using fiat money. And that's all the point of Bitcoin in the first place. So I think that the general statement by Jimmy is absolutely correct. I don't know why it triggers so much people. I mean, I know why, because we accepted the narrative that using Bitcoin is spending, while using money sometimes is about spending, but sometimes is about storing. And we accepted the narrative that people accepting Bitcoin with payment processor dumping on the market is a good thing, while it isn't. And we accepted and we forgot the points of Tier's law, then that says that you spend the shitty money first and the good money after.
So you're basically saying that you should be spending your Bitcoin cash?
Yeah, well, I did. I did. I took a while to split my Bitcoin Cash from my actual Bitcoin UTXO. So to split, it's an ugly term. I took a while to claim my Bitcoin Cash airdrop from using my Bitcoin UTXO. But because of privacy concerns and security concerns, many people gave up their privacy completely with these airdrops. For example, consolidating all their UTXO set into one maybe address of an exchange with name and surname and KYC identity. So many people did terrible things for their privacy with these airdrops. I took a while to collect it, but when I did, I spent it in order to buy Bitcoin first thing. So yes, if you have Bitcoin Cash or Bcash, you should use that way before Bitcoin. I completely agree.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to comment on another comment which I read on Twitter, because it's the most active place where people debate ideas which are not always maybe profound or meaningful in any way. But I think Jackson Palmer has at some point said that if you have the term maximalist in your description on Twitter, then you should replace it with close-minded.
No, I think that's actually completely nonsense. I mean, the term maximalist was created in order to represent people using basic logic and common sense about Bitcoin and altcoins as some kind of close-minded, cultish, intolerant sect. So that was the original design of the word, and we self-ironically adopted the word. And right now, people using the term Bitcoin maximalist in the description are mostly just signaling that they are using some kind of healthy skepticism, and they want extraordinary proofs in order to sustain extraordinary claims. Bitcoin itself was an extraordinary claim, and many people required a lot of evidence and a lot of explaining in order to accept that there was something possibly capable of overthrowing the fiat money system worldwide. So that was a very extraordinary claim. Where we still should adopt this claim to a certain degree, because nothing is certain. Bitcoin could still fail, but if you adopt a rational mindset and if you adopt any kind of healthy skepticism, then you know that the default approach should be that something extraordinary usually and too good to be true is usually too good to be true. So having thousands of different coins, each one serving the market as money, is a inconsistent scenario, because one point of money is that it is the most saleable good on the market, and the most saleable good is one. And in every kind of local market that you can imagine, there is one form of money that usually gets to include, gets to represent the best money, and usually cannibalizes the others. Sometimes you don't see that because you have external interferences, like for example nation states. They monopolize money, and they impose political money with legal tender. So you can see I mean, you could see one form of money in the old times, which was the gold standard, gold. Now you can see different forms of money, but that's because of political imposition of different nation states. But if you go to the free market, so if you also go to the black markets of many nation states, for example, Venezuela or Cuba or the Soviet Union before the Berlin Wall crashed down, then you could find the only one basically strong currency, that was the US dollar, being actually used instead of the depreciated alternative. So maximalism in this regard is just being realistic and expecting economical typical behaviors to still be in place, and do not expect extraordinary suspensions of laws of logic and economy. Also, there is also a point about skepticism about technological revolutions. Like, there is a very good essay by Andrew Polstra about altcoin. He published it like I think 3 years ago, and it was describing all the subtle, very small mistakes than people creating the first altcoins did, because creating a new crypto system is not easy, and it's a kind of a miracle that we have one that actually works. And miracles, they tend not to replicate very, very often. So I completely disagree with that statement. If you don't want to use the label maximalism because you don't want to basically concede this kind of negative depiction, then don't use that term. But people using that term to describe themselves are mostly just signaling that they are logical and reasonable.
Okay, so I will ask you one last question, which revolves around commenting on somebody else's comments. But I saw that Roger Ver was very critical of your PowerPoint presentation, and he precisely picked that slide, which was the most controversial about it. And I think it was the one in which you said that Bitcoin is the only legit cryptocurrency. Everything else is a scam. Don't trust anyone who tells you to sell your Bitcoin. Don't trade your Bitcoin, just hold it. And how did you feel when that went viral on Twitter?
Actually, not very happy, because the narrative in my presentation was studied. I would say it's probably overstating, because I created that the night before, as kind of always. But I was thinking at the presentation that I was going to give, and I was there was a path in my mind. Like, I will describe why I'm going to talk about Bitcoin maximalism. I will put here the most possible triggering and scary and the counterintuitive set of maximalist rules in order to trigger you, people of the audience, which, by the way, were people inside the conference of Baltic Only Badgers. So they were all already Bitcoin maximalists. So it was some kind of inside joke. So I want to represent what we all believe in the most possibly triggering kind of way, and then I will explain some logical assumption, and I will show you that the consequences of these logical assumptions, if they are not the triggering sentences that are wrote down, they are anyway counterintuitively, paradoxically, very, very similar to these general prima facie heuristics. The rules in the slide were basically everything which is not Bitcoin is a scam. Of course, so let's start with the title of the slide. The title of the slide were the five universal truths about Bitcoin. No, the four universal truths about Bitcoin, which is itself mocking the Buddhist four universal truths. So the title itself was already an attempt to self-irony, in order to present that as a religious thing. You will not call something the four universal truth if it was not already some kind of somehow sarcastic. The first one was everything which is not Bitcoin is a scam. Of course, that cannot be taken literally. I mean, Linux is not Bitcoin, and it isn't a scam. Git is not Bitcoin, it isn't a scam. BitTorrent is not Bitcoin. Gold, physical gold, is not Bitcoin, it isn't a scam. My car, which even if it's not a Lambo, it's working very well. It's not a scam. So it's not literally everything, but everything which pretend to be something like Bitcoin or something like the next Bitcoin, using Bitcoin technology in improper ways in order to replicate the same kind of effect, enriching the creators, is prima facie, as a general heuristic, a scam until proven otherwise. That will be the nuanced definition. Of course, the simple definition is everything which is not Bitcoin is a scam. The second one was every attempt to change Bitcoin is a scam. Of course, neither these can be taken literally, like segregated witness or P2SH, maybe next on Schnorr or Sigashno input. They are changes to Bitcoin. But even when you implement the Light Network, even if you're not changing Bitcoin layer one, you are changing Bitcoin as a global as a global experience, as a global set of protocols. So of course we will change Bitcoin as a general experience for all the times being, and we will probably even change some more the base consensus with I hope very few and very slow last modification before reaching stability. So the scope, the goal of that second sentence was, you should think that every attempt at modifying Bitcoin is itself problematic and potentially dangerous and potentially an attack vector, and so we should also always prefer and protect status quo over any change until we get proven that the change is necessary and uncontentious and safe to deploy and tested, and so on and so on. So that your mindset should be, until proven otherwise, every attempt to fundamentally change the Bitcoin is something wrong. Even because if Bitcoin can change too much, the sound money characteristic has gone. Because if you can change the total supply, you don't have hard money anymore. If you can change maybe enforce blacklist or whitelist or KYC, the permissionless side of Bitcoin has gone. So there are some changes that will destroy Bitcoin's value proposition completely. Then there was a third truth, that was the one that we discussed before about Jimmy Song's triggering tweet, which is everybody who is trying to push you to spend Bitcoin is scamming you. There was a very good article by Michael Goldstein called everybody, or sorry, by Pierre, I guess, or no, it was Michael. Everyone is a scammer. Everyone is a scammer is a very good article on the Nakamoto Institute about the fact that when you have something like hard money, everybody wants you to spend and they want to hold. So it's a normal thing to try to trick others into spending a very valuable asset, and of course that's a user scam, which is or the word scam, which is a little bit loose and improper. And the last truth was, we should not be nice with scammers. Even these cannot be taken literally. I mean, I'm personally kind of nice with people that I consider doing very scammy things. Like when I meet Zucco Wilcox in a conference, he's a very nice guy, and I tend to be nice with him. But I think that Zcash is very unethical on different points of view, and it's very scammy in a way, that in the way it has been promoted for many reasons. So that's not literally either. But what I tried to convey with the last sentence was that we should append some social cost into social attacks on Bitcoin, because otherwise social attacks on Bitcoin, they carry zero technical cost. So there should be some kind of social protocol that makes expensive for the attacker to try to manipulate or distort or corrupt Bitcoin somehow. And especially because I mean, sometimes people think that if I call something a scam, it means that I want the government to step in banning that thing. it's the other way around. It's precisely because we don't want the government to step in, howsoever, that we need to create a self-regulating culture and attitude in which we enforce a very strict set of rules, and we keep ourselves to very high standard of ethics and technical precision, and we basically bash and mock and ridicule most of the scammy marketing, which is so common in other sectors. So in any sector which is not Bitcoin, I don't care very much if some marketing advertising is pushing some false narrative. But in Bitcoin, is very important, is more important to bash and mock and expose and debunk fake narratives, exactly because we don't want a regulator, we don't want consumer protection, we don't want any kind of legal restriction of liability. So the last sentence was basically, in the cypherpunk crypto anarchist model, you don't want the state to regulate stuff, but you do want people calling out lies or misconception or dishonest marketing. To answer, I spoke a lot. Your question was very simple. How did I feel about that slide? That slide was not intended to be to go viral on Twitter, as it was a completely serious slide. That said, I think it was, I mean, it's okay like this. It was like a filter. People incapable on understanding or people incapable of looking for the context of the slide, and incapable to understand the irony of the title itself, and incapable to understand that these sentences, even if clearly exaggerated and hyperbolic, they are actually very close to a good prima facie heuristic in order to navigate this world. They are basically filtering themselves out from the conversation. So if you feel so much triggered by that slide, it's a good signal for me that I should not probably engage with you in conversation. So it's a time-saving anti-spam mechanism. So thank you, Roger. I'm okay with that.
That's a good answer. I actually wrote an article about this, that a few years ago, the Bitcoin community was consisting of some of the smartest people who are actually aware of the financial system, and they saw what happened in 2008, 2009 when the banks collapsed. And they had all these ideals of turning Bitcoin into the next big financial instrument of the world. But we have seen in the last 2 or 3 years how all this spirit has vanished. And we have people who actually expect from the SEC to give an approval to the ETF for Bitcoin and open trading desks. And that's so much against the spirit and the ethos of the early Bitcoin adopters who actually wanted to distance themselves from the banks. And what do you think happened in the process? Do we have too many greedy investors like the Forex guys who just stepped in and wanted to make as much money as they could, and they ended up holding bags?
So first of all, I don't completely agree with you that the original narrative was especially against the banks. It was especially against bailouts to banks, like the typical, the Genesis block newspaper title was about the chancellor on branch of a second bailout of banks. So the problem is not that we have this business called bank, which is a business consisting of people on the market, proposing to other people to store their value for them, or to invest their wealth, giving out loans, so managing credit and debit and matching the demand and supply of credit. So that's not an evil thing itself. The problem with banks is that just like many other fields of the market, like the military, the self-defense, or in many cases the healthcare, it has been completely hijacked by government monopolies that started to use this monopoly in order to promote exclusions, control, Orwellian surveillance, and of course taxation in the form of inflation, and manipulation in the form of management of interest rates. So I think that the original narrative, even if probably we intercepted, as a Bitcoin community, we did intercept some kind of anti-banks, meaning anti-rich rhetoric. So like some kind of Occupy Wall Street rhetoric, like you're a banker, you're rich, so you're evil. But the point was never actually that you cannot have a guy managing credit. The point was that the sector of credit and money and banking in general has been completely hijacked by the government. So there are now rules that, for example, if you try to donate to WikiLeaks, the government convinced or forced the banks to shut down your payment to WikiLeaks, or if you try to save your wealth from inflation, the banks will help the government to inflate using fractional reserve, or if you are trying to compete with the government, like with e-gold, the banks will help the government to shut you down. If you purchase goods and service, the banks will help the government to track you down and spy on you, and eventually punish you for your preferences. And especially the banks are betting financially. If they win, they get the profits. If they lose, the government will take money from other people in order to bail out the losers. So they can never lose, and so that generates a lot of moral hazard. And so the banks are and the financial sector in general, they are getting even more and more risky and unsustainable over time because of moral hazard created by bailouts. So Bitcoin was an antidote to that. Bitcoin was a way to disintermediate banks directly, because banks were corrupted by the violence of the state. The fact that some bank could maybe serve some Bitcoin investor and not Bitcoin user, but Bitcoin investor, is actually not so bad. I don't think that the SEC allowing a Bitcoin ETF or the Bitcoin future markets, they are not bad things per se. Bitcoin users, people that want to use Bitcoin to store wealth in an unconfiscatable way, they don't care about ETF. They will get Bitcoin because an ETF can be confiscated, while real Bitcoin cannot be confiscated. People who want to, again, donate to WikiLeaks or do or move money out of China, they don't need a Bitcoin ETF, because you cannot move a Bitcoin ETF out of China. You cannot use a Bitcoin ETF to donate to WikiLeaks. People who really need Bitcoin as a tool will use Bitcoin. But if somebody just wants to bet on the price of Bitcoin, I think that's good for us, because more demand for synthetic Bitcoin can anyway bring up the price. And I mean, I don't expect an old legacy investor, the guy who is used to take up the phone, call his banks and say, let's buy two shares of Apple, 3 barrels of oil, and 3 Bitcoins. This guy will never become a cypherpunk managing his own full node and his own private keys. He doesn't need it. This guy does not need permissionless finance. He's okay with permissionless finance. He just wants to speculate on the price. So I think there is nothing bad in permissionless finance allowing people to speculate on Bitcoin price. I think that's okay. The problem is that people is expecting the SEC or the other regulators to actually give a pass to all these ICO centralized and super easy to censor initiative. It's like, so the government is telling you that you cannot issue securities without following some kind of stupid regulation, which is very bad for financial exclusion and everything. But the government is forcing you to follow this regulation. Now you create your centralized ICO or altcoin, and suddenly you hope that the government is not going to enforce the same regulation on you only because you pretend to use the buzzwords like blockchain or crypto, but you are still completely centralized, completely censorable, but you hope that the government will not crack you down. And that's a little bit, I don't know if this fairy tale exists in every kind of culture. In Italy, we have it, the three little pigs. So you have
Oh, yes.
one pig that built, okay, you have it too. So you have this pig is building his home with straw, the second one with wood, and the third one with bricks. So the third one takes a lot of time. It's like he's the boring pig. He will have to study architecture. He will have to spend a lot of energy and money and time slowly building the brick house. The other, like the straw pig, the straw house pig, he will just do something quick, dirty, super effective, and he will dance all the time, mocking the brick house pig because he was faster and more effective. Altcoins and ICOs token are like that. Bitcoin has been built in order to resist the regulator wolf when it comes. So Bitcoin has been created in a way that when the wolf comes, he cannot bring the house down. While altcoins are just like the straw house. They have been built very quickly, very easily. You don't have all the hard things that you need in Bitcoin, so you can profit more and buy your Lamborghini. But when the wolf comes, they are now like with Ethereum. They are now hoping to keep the wolf calm using lobbyism or like asking, please do not censor us, which is completely nonsense.